Welcome to Betrayal Trauma Recovery, BTR.org. I'm Anne. I'm sure you remember what it was like when you were searching for help, maybe for your husband, hoping to find the right program or therapist. That's why I started podcasting. I supported my husband through 7 years of pornography addiction recovery, and not one therapist during that time told me I was experiencing emotional and psychological abuse and sexual coercion. I didn't want any other woman on the planet to be in the dark. If you're like the majority of my listeners, you're experiencing the type of abuse that's invisible and difficult to wrap your head around. Your husband is using porn or having affairs or lying to you, and you're getting the same bad advice about how to improve communication or your relationship. If you need support from women who totally understand, check out our daily group session schedule at btr.org/group. We'd love to see you in a session today. One simple, anonymous way to help spread the word is to subscribe to the Betrayal Trauma Recovery podcast, and will help make this podcast more visible and will help save other women from getting the wrong kind of help, like a couple program that will make this type of abuse worse. For those of you who've subscribed to this podcast, thank you so much. Your support means so much to me. A member of the BTR community, we're going to call her Lee, is on today's episode. She's going to be sharing her story and then also how she implemented the strategies in the Living Free and Message workshops. I've been sharing some of the reviews from Apple Podcasts. Here's one we received. She said, "This podcast was the first podcast I found on my search for an understanding about my situation. I'm in a much better place because of the knowledge this podcast gave me. This podcast was the catalyst for my safety and recovery journey. Thank you, Anne, for your devotion to this podcast and for your devotion to helping other women. I have so much more confidence, peace, and sanity. The knowledge you gifted me has helped to lead me out of the wilderness. Thank you, Anne, for caring about us. Fight on, Anne." Thank you so much for that review. I really appreciate you. Your reviews and your comments on the podcast really sustain me because it's hard for me as a single mom. It's hard for all of us. The good news is we're all in the trenches together. And the bad news is we're all in a trench. But as we all support each other, we raise each other up, and we create an army of healthy women to help other women get to safety. And speaking of an army of women and women who are incredible, welcome, Lee.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Many women in this situation go through years and years of emotional abuse and psychological abuse, and they don't even realize it. So let's talk about your experience. You got married really young. In the beginning, did you realize it was abuse?
No, I did not know until pretty much my mid-30s. I got married at 19, and we were really young. And so I just thought it was a maturity thing and that eventually we would get past that. And there was also addiction. And again, I thought that that was just a thing that we would be able to get over at some point once we grew up.
And what types of things did he, quote unquote, struggle with? In the addict world, they're always like, he's struggling with this or that. And I'm like, there's some choices he's making. What were some of the things that he was choosing?
He really struggled throughout our entire marriage with pornography. And unfortunately, it just became a bigger and bigger problem. There was always pornography in our home. And I think I just became immune to that part of it, though. So I thought, as soon as we grew up, he'll stop drinking and the pornography will go away.
A lot of victims have that feeling like, okay, once he can get this pornography thing under control, then he's not going to act like this anymore. That's hard to kind of recognize that all of these behaviors are abusive. They're not going to get better. What do you think was the biggest contributing factor to you not recognizing it was abuse throughout those years?
Comparison. And I feel like so many women do this. And this is something that I am so glad we get to talk about today, because I've been thinking a lot about it as I hear like different stories from friends and family members. Just the idea that someone else's situation is worse than yours, or your life isn't that bad because you have a nicer home, or my life isn't that bad because he doesn't say this to me, or he comes home at a decent hour. It was just that comparison of hearing other people's stories and just finding one thing that might have been better in my life than someone else's made me assume that it was still okay to stay in that relationship.
That makes sense to me. Like, well, mine does the dishes every night. So I'm so lucky, or mine has a really good job. What were the things that you thought were better? What were the things that you were proud of?
It's so crazy because you don't see the things that really are in your relationship at that time. He might have done the dishes one night, and I took that one night and pulled it along for everything else. He never cussed me out or called me a name. He never was a yeller, even though he was really unsupportive. He was also always very generous with his time.
So at times you're thinking, well, he doesn't scream at our kids, so he must be a good guy. At least not all the time, or he didn't scream that one time. Or the other night he was great, so I'm lucky. A lot of women don't realize he's abusive because they think I'm so lucky, he's such a great guy. So that's really, really common.
I also don't think women realize how much effort and work they put in to make their spouse a good guy. And what I mean by that is a lot of the things I was proud of, I was doing, not him. I would make sure we were at family gatherings. I made sure our kids looked good. I made sure we were going to church on time. And, all those things that were important to me and that I felt were essential to building a good family, I did. And instead of looking at how much work I was putting in, I included him in that. I made it like it was his, like this was his accomplishments. And I think that that's where my mind got a little bit skewed. Like we had a good family and I looked at it like that, but I didn't realize that so much of it was my own work and wasn't really his work.
Yeah, a lot of women do that. They attribute characteristics to him that actually she has. That comparison is interesting because there's always going to be someone who seems like they have it worse. And so you think, well, all marriages must have problems, but like the problems we have seem quote unquote manageable or, something like that. So here you are thinking these are just maturity things or that you're so lucky in some ways. Were there any other factors that kept you from seeing the abuse?
Shame. I was married really young and a lot of people questioned that. And I had family and friends both tell me I was too young. And I felt the pressure there to stay and keep it together and not fail at this. I think that's why I kept it together and stayed a lot longer. And I didn't want to admit to anybody that I failed.
You weren't failing. You had a spouse that was failing, but you weren't. But it feels like that when you're being emotionally abused because you think everything is your fault, right? Or that you're responsible for everything. So that's common as well.
I had just a few friends that I would communicate with about it. The problem with those friends, even though they were a good outlet for a release, they didn't really understand my situation because they didn't have a spouse like that. I mean, they knew it was bad and they felt sorry for me. I could feel that. They understood it. They gave me the space to be able to talk to them, which I appreciate. But they just weren't in the same situation. And a lot of times, the friends that I did communicate with had pretty decent marriages. And it made me feel, again, like I needed to be more like them. And I needed to maybe not complain as much,
Okay, so how do you recognize that it is abuse?
I ended up in a Facebook group with one of the members of BTR, and she was very open about it, which I'm so grateful for. And I'm so grateful for women who are open about it. The group that we were in had actually nothing to do with this topic. She was just open and shared a lot of her personal life. Again, I'm so grateful for that. And the BTR community opened up a whole new world for me where I started to understand that everybody's looks different. But even still then at the very beginning, I don't think I was ready to let go of the idea of keeping my marriage together. And then it started to get really bad. My husband had sent me some really abusive videos of him talking to me in a very violent and perverse way. And I didn't know what to do. And I finally sent them to the Betrayal Trauma Recovery Group. Within, I think, 10 minutes, I had a whole group of women together supporting me and helping me through this.
I'm going to take a short break here to talk about trauma mama husband drama. So many women who go through this, their friends, family member, clergy, people they're around really don't understand. And they say things that are hurtful when they're really genuinely trying to help. They just don't get it. And so the things they say, like, why aren't you just over this? Or why don't you stop talking about him? If you were over it, you would stop. Or I don't know, the myriad of things that people say that might be well-meaning, might not be well-meaning, but are really triggery and hurtful. They're difficult to go through. And Trauma Mama Husband Drama was designed to be able to give friends and family to help them understand what you're going through, to help them understand the trauma you've experienced. To order Trauma Mama Husband Drama, you can go to our website, btr.org/books, or you can go directly to Amazon and search Trauma Mama Husband Drama. When you order it, please also follow that up with a verified review from Amazon, because every single one of your reviews helps isolated women find it on Amazon. Even if they don't buy the book, they can still find this free podcast. So again, we really appreciate your comments on this episode on our website, posting about it. We just want every woman to be able to have access to this free podcast and the information here. With the support of the women in the BTR group, is this the moment you realize, whoa, this is really serious?
I really believe that was the moment it became very clear to me. I always felt like maybe I was being dramatic. And so when someone actually got to witness it and they said to me, this is not okay, and then they said, this is abusive, is when I realized that it was time probably to make a big change. I decide to start opening up and start talking a little bit more and sharing more of my experiences. I wanted the BTR community to understand really the magnitude. It seemed so big at the time and so scary. I was worried about his reaction, about my finances, about my kids, about this home that we had just rented together. What would we do? We had just gotten a new dog, and there were so many things that I was worried about. I was scared. Each step was a step that I didn't think I was capable of doing. And they told me I could. And so I kept taking that step.
What about your real life friends and family? What did they think?
I had left him 7 different times before this time. And I think family and the friends that I had opened up to were hesitant to believe it this time too. But they were excited. All of them were going to continually support me.
So let's talk about the first few months after you left. It feels like you're like ripping your own heart out or cutting your own arm off. How did you get through that time?
So that was a really, really hard time for me. I would make fun of the situation by saying I lived in a house of depression. I would come home from work and lay on the couch. I watched the same movies over and over and over again every night. Lord of the Rings and Forrest Gump. I don't know why, don't ask. But I would watch them over and over again. I was just really sad and fearful, and I didn't know if I could really do it. Financially, it didn't feel real to me because I had tried so many times. So while I was living in that house of depression, I didn't really feel like I had a lot to live for, but then I bit into a delicious peach. I started looking for tender mercies, and I believe that that's what held me up, along with the women from the Betrayal Trauma Recovery Group, but just constantly looking for those tender mercies and finding those simple things. A lot of times it feels so dark, and we feel like we need something of a greater magnitude to take us out of that darkness, instead of looking for those little things, that little speck of light almost. And I do want to share one significant tender mercy. And it's a night I came home and I was exhausted and I just wanted a bowl of cereal and a clean spoon. And like I said before, I hadn't really been keeping up with my housework. There's probably a lot of dishes. And I just wanted there to be that one clean spoon. And when I opened up the drawer, there was one last clean spoon. And I just remember thinking, thank you. Thank you. Because that's all I needed was a bowl of cereal and a clean spoon. And I feel like it's so important for women to hang on to those like little moments every single day to try to find something in their life that is small but so significant.
Oh, I love that story. In the Living Free workshop, we have an exercise about this. We call it the best possible tasks and best possible moments. And here you're calling it a tender mercy. So that's awesome because those little things can really give us a feeling of peace. There's another part of Living Free where we're focusing on our dreams and what we want. Was there anything that you decided, hey, I have a goal and I'm going to accomplish it?
I've had so many, but the one biggest one, this is crazy. I painted my piano pink. And this seems so weird for everybody, but in my relationship, I was always told that I couldn't do anything. I would always want to do these projects, and he was a carpenter. And he would always tell me that they were too hard. If I explained to him what I was going to do, he would tell me it wouldn't turn out right, or it would look like garbage. He was always saying that it would look like garbage. So I was so scared to do anything. And when I started painting this piano, I thought it was going to look like garbage because that's what I had been told that anything I did was going to look like. And it is so beautiful. I love that piano, and it turned out so good. And I moved into a permanent home this year, too. I want to start remodeling and doing a little bit of interior decorating that I've never gotten to do either, really. And I want to really learn how to play that piano that I just finished painting. And then setting better boundaries for myself. I'm trying to work on boundaries. And then just strengthening my faith in my home and in myself, continuing on with that.
Do you have any advice for women who might have the same fears that you did?
Yeah, you need to find support. Betrayal Trauma Recovery is a great group for that. And I know I'm on this podcast. I want everyone to know I'm not pitching this because I'm on here. It changed my life being a part of that group. I do not think I would have been able to get out of my situation without their support. And that support has not ended. That support continues on and it just keeps growing. I have not ended those relationships. I've only grown and extended those relationships. And as my situation changes, I just meet new people and new women and new friendships that I've created in that group. And then the other thing is just what we talked about in the beginning, and that's don't compare your situation to someone else's. That is so important and something that I wish all women would stop doing. I know there's that poster, comparison is the thief of joy, but I don't think women recognize when it really truly is doing them so much harm. I just would encourage all women to not look at someone else and say their situation's worse and mine isn't. I would encourage women to look more at, is the behavior acceptable? Are they happy? Is what their husband doing in line with their beliefs and standards? And if they're not, that's the problem. It doesn't need to be someone else's standards or beliefs. It's what they're comfortable with. And I wish a lot more women would look at that.
Meaning, I'm not okay with porn in my home, or I'm not okay with yelling. This is not acceptable for me in my home, and I don't feel safe. Rather than thinking, well, these other people think he's an okay guy.
You also might find someone that says that pornography is okay. I had a lot of friends tell me that. Like, why was I upset? Or I had people tell me that it's okay that he's drinking. We're having a good time. Those kind of things. And again, that put a lot of shame and guilt on me because I thought I was taking the fun out of our lives, or I thought there was something wrong with me, that I thought that pornography was wrong. And maybe it was okay. And maybe it was beneficial to our relationship.
Having the confidence to think other people might feel differently, but this is my home and this is my life. And I deserve to feel safe. And I want to be able to live a life that is consistent with my own values.
Yes, absolutely. I really wish I would have looked at those and told myself I wasn't willing to accept that or put up with it. Now I'm going to be 35, and I know that there are so many things that I'm just not willing to put up with. And even though someone might tell me that they're not significant enough or they're not really a problem, I will go by my own standards. And I think that that's something that I've learned and would like to tell my younger self, like, hey, don't go by the world standards, that popular saying. Don't go by the world standards. I would go by my standards.
And even some women don't go by maybe your church's standards. And what I mean by that is people who might say, well, you just need to love and serve, and then everything will be okay, and don't judge or something. Those types of things that like an external church or a therapist or somebody might put on you to be like, no, tolerate this for some reason, or be patient with it for some reason. I think that's another way that we can say, no, 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 no. I deserve to feel safe in my own home.
What you're comfortable with, right? It's what you're comfortable with. And would you be comfortable with a rock in your shoe, and would you continue to walk with a rock in your shoe? Or would you remove that shoe and take out that rock? And even if someone said, you could walk a little bit longer, it's okay. No, you're uncomfortable with that rock in that shoe. You would take the time to sit down and take off that shoe and take out that rock.
If someone said, but don't you feel bad for the rock? What's the rock going to do? How is that rock going to get around without you? You can be like, the rock can do whatever it wants. It's not going to be in my shoe. It's an adult rock. It can handle it. Me taking it out has nothing to do with the rock. Whatever helps women to be like, I can do this is what works. And it's different for everyone.
I just want to say, because I know they're going to listen to this, to all my betrayal trauma recovery women that helped me through this and the ones that I'm going to meet in the future, I am so grateful for each and every single one of you. And I really don't think I could be where I am. And I don't think I could be going where I'm going without their continual support. So I'm so grateful.
Have you found that being away from him has enabled you to grow stronger?
Absolutely. It has made me recognize it more too. I actually have been dealing a lot with anger lately as well. There's those 5 or 7 grief cycles, and I am in the cycle of anger. The anger for me is a protection. It's like a shield. But the problem with showing that anger to an abuser, it's getting them the same amount of attention that they're seeking.
They're not looking for peace. When peace becomes your absolute top priority, many women start using the strategies in the Living Free workshop and the BTR message workshop. So you are really interested in implementing strategies to get some peace in your life. First of all, let's talk about what your concerns were.
A lot of the women in the group I know experience some alterations of the reality because of the situations that their husbands have put them in. They like to kind of twist your thoughts. And I lived in that false reality. Anytime I had concerns where I knew something was real, he would alter my reality and confuse me and just convince me that what I was thinking was completely illogical or not accurate. As I went through my divorce, he continued to do this, and he continued to manipulate things and continue to tell me that things that I said that I never said, or things that I did say that he would say I never said. And that was really difficult to live like that, always questioning my own reality and not knowing if what I was thinking I was doing was actually real. It was very confusing. So why I wanted to go into this is because I needed documentation of what I was saying and what he was saying so I could trust myself almost more and trust that what I knew to be true was truth, and I had that evidence in writing.
So you have this evidence that he's gaslighting you. You have this evidence that he's emotionally and psychologically abusing you. You have this evidence that he's trying to alter your reality. You're thinking, I can't communicate with him in any way, shape, or form without him lying to me, without him twisting the truth, without things going sideways.
Yeah, without crazy making, because that's what it was. It was crazy making.
What were your concerns? You're thinking, oh, that would be amazing if I could stop interacting with him, but I'm scared it won't work because what were the things at the beginning before you decided, hey, I'm going to try this out that kind of held you back from even considering it at first?
When I had tried to implement a little bit of this in the past, he would try to tell me that he was computer illiterate or he didn't really know how to use technology, which was not founded at all, I later realized. The second was that he would use it to not communicate certain things with me about the children while they were with him. And again, it would fall back onto, oh, I was computer illiterate, so I forgot to tell you that. Whether that be that he was going to drop them off later, whether that be that maybe not telling me that the kids were uncomfortable and wanted to come home. He would use it as an excuse to say, oh, sorry, I couldn't communicate with you. And I think that was my biggest fear was with the children, that if there was an emergency, how would we contact each other? So that was another one of my concerns and why I kind of kept that verbal communication going.
You were like, I really want to do this, but it just seems impossible. And I remember talking to you on the phone, and I said, the first step is believing that it's possible, to know that you can. And then you just have to figure out the how. How did that change in mindset from like, I can't do this, it's impossible, we have kids together, to, okay, I can do this. Now I just need to figure out how. How did that change of mindset help you to start actually looking for solutions?
How that helped me is I took away like the impossibility of it and thought I need to do this. It wasn't even that I can or can't do it, it was that I needed to do it. For my own sanity, I had to start implementing this. Otherwise, I just knew that this was going to be a constant cycle and a constant battle. And I was going to constantly be questioning my own reality. And I would just stay stuck in that cycle of his manipulation and abuse. So it just came to the point where there was no option, there was no choice. I had to do it.
So when you decide, now I know I'm doing this, now I'm in the problem solving, how do I do it phase, what were the first things that you needed to consider before implementing it?
So, one of the first things that I needed to consider was in case of an emergency, if something happened while the kids were in his care or my care, how would we communicate to each other? And I thought of a plan immediately. It wasn't even that hard. And all of a sudden, it was fixed. Like, I think that was my biggest hurdle. I think if I were to be honest with myself, I think it was losing that connection with him. Even though I was going through this divorce process, even though I was so badly hurt for so many years by him, there was still a connection that I had to him. And losing that was somewhat painful for me. I sold a car, and even that had a connection to him that was painful for me to let go of in a weird way. The reality sunk in, and that can go two ways when that reality sets in, that there's no hope of it getting better. That could lead to wanting to run back to that bad situation. That could lead to growth.
So you decide it's time to implement the strategies that I was teaching you at the time, the ones that are in Living Free and Message workshops. Can you talk about the moment where you decided, hey, I really need to implement these strategies?
There was a pivotal moment where I knew I needed to do that. One catastrophic day, my son had actually had a confrontation with him, and I went and picked him up, and we had an altercation outside of his family's house. He did end up getting a little bit physical. And then later on that evening, he had also taken my daughters and told them he was going to drop them off in the middle of nowhere. When I had come to pick up my son, I was talking to him and I had rolled down my window just a little bit. He was able to reach in the car and take my phone. During our marriage, he was really obsessed with my phone too. He would wake me up in the middle of the night to go through my phone and keep me up all hours. And he was just really obsessive about it. And so it doesn't surprise me that he went for my phone again. And when I got out of the car to grab it from him, he started smacking me, telling me to get away. Eventually, I gave up and thought, you know what, this isn't worth it, and I'm going to walk away. And he threw the phone after that. It was after that day that I thought, you know what, I cannot live in this anymore. So that's when I implemented what you had encouraged me to do. But I don't know if you remember during that conversation, the other thing that you encouraged me to do, which was to get a restraining order and finally get that implemented. And these two things came together.
Let's talk about some common myths with the message workshop tools. You were concerned that you wouldn't participate. I had a smile on my face when you said this because they can't not participate. If you block them on your phone, there's nothing they can do about it. They can't call you. They could call you from another number, but if you have a boundary for yourself that you never answer the phone, if it's a unknown caller, and you just wait for them to leave a message. If you block them on your email, if you delete your social media accounts, there's nothing they can do about that.
How the protective order works here in Arizona is once they grant you that protective order, they send it to the sheriff's department and it just automatically goes out. So it takes away like you having to sit there and should I or shouldn't I? Once it's done, it's done. So during that time, I was able to notify him that we would no longer be communicating verbally. Everything would go to email. And he did put up a fight. This was through text, and he did put up a fight a little bit and say, you know, that's not going to work. I don't do good with electronics, which now, since we've been doing this since June, he can email just fine. He is not computer illiterate. He is perfectly capable. Again, it goes back to him altering my reality or confusing me or making me believe something that's not true. He had convinced me that he doesn't understand. He's not good with electronics. And that was part of my hesitation, was him convincing me he couldn't do this. So there was no way. Like, how was I going to be able to communicate with him when he didn't know how to really write an email, which is what he told me. And it ended up being not true. So again, it goes back to that crazy making and me questioning myself and is this possible based off of his lies. So he cannot call me, he cannot text me. He's not supposed to be within a certain feet of me. He can only email me. That's the only way he can contact me. If he needs to contact the kids, they have their own separate phones, so he is able to communicate with them. But if he has any specific questions for me or we're making plans, it all has to go through email.
And how have those been? Have they been gaslighting?
This is something interesting. I mean, most people think if you go through email, it takes away all the manipulative communication, but it actually doesn't. You have to still be very aware and very careful.
Yeah, that's why learning the BTR message workshop tools is so important.
In the beginning, they were very emotionally filled. Both of us trying to express like our hurt and our pain.
I don't think he was really trying to express his hurt and his pain as much as he was manipulating your emotions.
Oh, of course, yes. And in me, I was trying to express hurt and pain, and it just didn't work. Now I try to answer everything with what you taught. That's it. No more than that. I have been doing that for a while now. There have been 2 times recently where I have gone out of my way to email him and to address things that are not appropriate to address anymore. After that, I knew I made a mistake and then I get back on the course. I do not need to go into these pages of explanations or reasonings or even comforting him. I just need to respond very simply. Another thing you taught that I love is the broken record. One of the things is right now he's on supervised visitation and he keeps asking me to pick up the kids. And I have a one line that I say to that. I'm sorry you can't do that right now. And he'll say something like, well, it would just be easier and nobody else has time to pick them up today. And I just say, I'm sorry, but you can't do that right now. And then he might come back with something else. And I just keep repeating it until finally he's exhausted and doesn't even ask. And it's just that you pick a line, you stick with that line, and every single time they come at you, you use the same line over and over again until finally they run out of questions, they run out of things to say, and they're exhausted.
Yeah, that's why the tools in the BTR message workshop are specific lines, statements to write over and over. The message workshop clearly explains why and how to use them with real life examples from real messages from women like you who have applied it. Anything that you see now that quote unquote shows that he can communicate as a good person is only grooming and manipulation.
There still is a big part of me that hopes that he is a good person. But like what you're saying, there is trickery to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I always tell people I can't really give him anything because he is a give an inch, take a mile kind of a guy.
How has it felt to be free of his phone calls?
So good. I don't have that pit in my stomach anymore when I see his name. My phone isn't something to fear really anymore. I'm not sitting there wondering if he's sent me a text message on my phone. Like I can go to my phone and it's not a place of worry. And the other thing is so much comfort in knowing the things that I say and the things that he says and being able to go back and know that my reality and what I know is true. And I have that evidence now. And that is such a gift for me because I really do struggle with that still, with just knowing my own truth. Even outside of our marriage, I really do struggle with confidence in myself and confidence in trusting myself still because of 15 years of somebody questioning my truth or making me question my truth. Now, again, it's that rebuild. I'm rebuilding and I'm rebuilding that trust in myself and knowing that what I'm saying is truth because I have proof.
So if you're interested in using the strategies in the message workshop to eliminate that fear and worry from having to communicate and have the proof that Lee is talking about, these concepts will work for women in any situation, even if you're still married. Lee has described doing it with a protective order in place, but you don't need a protective order. You don't even need to be separated. Maybe you're co-parenting. You can just know the concepts and then use them in whatever way works for you. The BTR message workshop builds on the strategies you learn in the Living Free workshop. So enroll in the Living Free workshop first so you can get those foundational strategies. The Living Free workshop uses an amazing workbook if you want to dig really deep and process things on a really deep level. Some women don't even use the workbook the first time through, or they never use it. They just run through all the videos super fast, and they don't even answer the questions below the videos. They just type a few letters in. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And once you're done with the Living Free lessons, whether you've busted through it without doing any of the exercises or questions, or whether you've processed it on a deep level, either way, the message workshop will be available to you because you will have an overview of the Living Free strategies. So go to btr.org/workshops to learn more. If this podcast is helpful to you, please help us reach other women by following or subscribing and giving us a 5-star rating. Thank you for helping other women find us. If you've already purchased a copy of my book, Trauma Mama, Husband Drama, please circle back and give it a 5-star rating. A lot of women are searching for books about betrayal trauma on Amazon, and rating Trauma Mama will help them find this podcast, which is free to everyone. Your donations keep this podcast going. Go to our website, btr.org, scroll to the bottom, click on Support the BTR Podcast. And until next week, stay safe out there.